good to be together and have with me a very special guest, Attilio Polo, who is first and foremost a friend and an inspiration with whom we've shared times of peace and war. And we sailed the seas, partied a lot, grew together. And for a long time now, he's in the Philippines since 2015. Is that right?
2015, so approaching
Yeah.
my 8 years.
And he has the dream life of a middle school wellness teacher at the International School of Manila, a diver, a photographer, and a volunteer at Vesna Panglao Conservation in Bohol. So thank you so much for accepting this invitation, Attilio, and taking our
Thank you,
conversation
Maria. I'm really
seriously.
excited. I'm very grateful, and I love talking about the way life has turned out for me, and the way that our international experiences have kind of interwoven into what I do now. So I get to live and have an outlet for all my passions, and I'm very happy to share with you and your audience and your listeners or viewers.
Yes, absolutely. So tell me more, please. Share with us more about this tapestry of life that brought you where you are right now. Because when we met, we were doing promotional campaigns for country at the very beginning of like country branding, right?
I mean, that was, there was a really interesting time. We were in our 20s, mid 20s, and young and wild and internet free, mostly, if you can remember that time. And as the year went by and the projects went by, and we went from country to country to country, collecting experiences and really incredible experiences. I don't know if at the time we realized and appreciated just how much it was, because we were working hard on commercial projects. But yeah, I came to a point when I thought, what's the point of all of this if all we do is just for ourselves? If we live this life just for ourselves, if we learn all these things and they just stay within ourselves without really the opportunity to turn them into anything fruitful or productive or useful. So that's when I decided, when I left that industry, that education and teaching would be a perfect outlet. I'd always had an incline to work with people, train people. But I gave a go at teaching, and I trained for a year. I went back to the UK. That had sort of always been my base, and qualified as a teacher in a public school. It was a very, very crazy year for me. And I realized that I loved it. I was already 32 at the time, and I lived enough life to have perspective, and had lived enough experiences, and they were really meaningful. I was teaching languages. I was teaching Spanish and French. Having been to so many francophone countries all over Latin America, Spain, it was very relatable. I could offer something to the kids that would make my subject, in rural England, a little bit more relevant and approachable, and stimulate their curiosity. And that's where I knew that, yeah, teaching was for me. I did miss the road, however, because once on the road, it's kind of always part of you. And that's when I decided to go back to an international field, in international teaching, because I myself was an international student, and I left Italy, my home country, when I was 17, to go to an international school. So when the call came, and I'd been accepted to work in Manila, I felt like, great. I've never been to the Philippines, spirit of adventure. And I realized when I arrived in this country that, wow, it had all the things that I had seen, experienced, lived all over the world, all in one place. The good, the bad, the ugly, the tropical and the polluted, the stunningly beautiful nature, and incredible, human degradation conditions as well, which is part of what life really is. Lots of people who don't get the opportunity that we had to see the world are kind of left with one image of their own central self and environment, and everything else stays outside. But for us, we've been inside so many places that they are the inside, they are the world, if you know what I mean. So the chance to just have it here, and the diversity, the contrast on a daily basis was just perfect. Plus it's really hot, and I hate winter, so it couldn't have been better. But then I
As you
started.
reach Philippines, just to jump in, as you reach Philippines, what was the most striking and endearing thing that you remember? One of the first.
the very first things when I arrived in the Philippines was the people were super friendly. I mean, we've met friendly people all over the world, but I guess there's something about the Filipinos that is just a little extra friendly and curious and respectful and kind, even from the first time you meet. Of course, you do need to have a sort of, you need to have a little savoir-faire with people and try to connect. And I like to connect by learning languages, and I try my very best from the outset to learn Tagalog. And one of the hardest things I've ever tried, by the way. And soon I discovered that, yeah, once you do get to know the people for real, then there's like a whole different world, from this sort of immediate, obvious kindness that they project. There's also a lot more, and there's a lot of, it's a complicated psyche. I remember when they took us out on a tour of the Spanish town in Manila, the ruins rather of Intramuros. And our guide was amazing. He told us about the colonial scars that were living through the Philippines, and how those were interwoven, from the Spanish time to the American time to the Japanese time, and how the Filipino identity was a really mixed, almost confused sometimes. And it's a difficult, compared to other nations in Asia, which have had a more sort of stable national psyche, if you like. Filipinos have gone through turbulence for centuries, and yet that confusion is part of who they are, and it makes them joyous, and it makes them a little bit different from all other places in Asia. So yeah, I think that little tour made me really connect all the dots. I've been all over, if you like, the former Spanish colonies, all over Latin America, Equatorial Guinea, Spain, and then I came here, and then you realize in an instant, wow, the world is very small, was very small even back then, when they were just shipping boats and annihilating civilizations, if you like. And then you realize, wow, what a crazy world we live in. And so it was really the moment that it clicked that, yeah, the world we live in is very much a function of the past, of this particular past, and the Philippines is that every single day. So I think that made me instantly fall in love with it. And then of course, my job is really intense, but I got to love the experience of other international people experiencing the Philippines, my students. And then I started traveling around the island and discovered that every island is unique in their own way, and there's 7,000 of them. So
7,000.
It's like a love at first sight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say also from my time of living in the Philippines, is that they are truly the most Latino of the Asian countries. So as you were saying, they have such a psyche that is a cocktail of many things, and you can relate at different levels with them.
Yeah, absolutely. You can, absolutely. Sometimes they're not really taught much about history, at school, or not in great detail, so discovering how all the Spanish vocabulary in Tagalog, or Filipino rather, where it comes from, they don't know. But once they find out, then amazing conversations start to happen. And then you realize, oh, look at the architecture here, and look at this particular dish there, or this expression there. And it's great. Yeah. You can't have that.
Will you amaze us with something in Tagalog?
Ako marunong ko mag-Tagalog na ngayon. I can speak Tagalog now. So it really impresses people. I mean, I would say it's conversational, but it opens not just like a physical door into places. It just opens a whole host of experiences once you're able to connect like that. Some people sometimes are wary of foreigners. Once you get past the sort of, oh, hello, sir, hello, ma'am, they still keep a little distance. But once you do break through and with language, it's just amazing, because then you get to also see it from their perspective. When some other foreigner comes in and they can't speak Tagalog, and it's like, oh, I get it now.
And coming back a little bit to this international island where you teach, to the International School of Manila, and your students that come from all over the world, you actually developed from languages. Now you've integrated wellness. So as we were saying, you are middle school wellness teacher. how is this experience? Because the idea of wellness overall is still a concept in the making and baking, right? Internationally, how do you live it and teach it?
Absolutely. I mean, our school is a really old school, actually. Just turned 103. We were going to turn 100 and celebrate in 2020, but COVID had other plans. And it really went, there's a lot of history of the Philippines in the history of my school. You know, started off as an American school during the time the Philippines was under American administration. During the Second World War, the Japanese occupied Manila, turned the school into a sort of camp, but they still managed to produce 30 plus graduates. Then he moved to a campus in Makati that you may remember, the business district. And then since 2002, it's in a brand new area of the city and with a really fancy campus. And yeah, I mean, the school is one of the few that had a foresight to actually add wellness as a subject. So wellness per se, the way people understand the word these days, it's more to do with well-being and mindfulness and all of that, which we kind of do, but we really take a scientific approach to health education, and we teach that from grade 5 to grade 9. So from the last year of elementary school, 3 years of middle school, and the first year of high school, for one semester. So one semester a year, it's compulsory for all the students to take this subject. So the approach that we use really is a sort of health isn't just your physical body. We use a tool that we call the wellness wheel that encompasses 6 different areas of health. I can actually show you. I could share my screen if you like
Yes,
on this.
please.
Because I think it's really interesting for maybe your listeners, whether they're students or just people, to see that health isn't just what you do to yourself, but it's really who you are. So taking care of yourself is really taking care of who you are holistically. So there you have it. I mean, I teach grade 5 and 6, so 10 and 11-year-olds, so 10 to 12-year-olds. So this is kind of adapted with language that would be accessible. But basically, we really look at health as a combination of these 6 different factors. So your physical health, of course, so your nutrition, your sleep, your exercise, how you take care of your physical body. So from the age of 10 to the age of 15, at a time of great physical change, in the students' lives, it's important to understand how their bodies are going to transform, grow, and adapt, and what they need to do to take care of that. We then look at social health, so the health of your relationships, so your connections to other people, because if those are positive, if those are healthy, then that will have a positive effect on you. So anything that goes along the lines of understanding friendship and empathy, or sympathy, the concept of respect, and the concept of influencing others. We talk about issues from school bullying all the way to trusted adults, and these particular connections in our lives, and to understand first that what they are and how to look after them so that they can impact us positively. Mental and emotional health obviously are 2 key buzzwords these days, especially after the pandemic, which, I mean, here in the Philippines, probably we had one of the hardest lockdowns in the world. Our schools were closed completely for almost 2 years. We taught on Zoom every day for 2 whole years. Under 15s weren't allowed out of the house for over a year and a half. So mental and emotional health, when we talk about emotional health, we really talk about developing emotional literacy. What we didn't have, perhaps in even our generations, we're not that old, but the ability to name emotions, understand what the emotional part of your brain does, how to deal with them, develop different strategies to acknowledge, accept, process emotions, and beyond the 5 basic emotions that we might all know about: happy, sad, angry, is important. And then, mental health, managing stress, managing your time, organizing yourself, doing activities that are conducive to that particular state of being. And then 2 other areas of health, which when we do or think about, we never really think about that as being part of our well-being, but they are important. One is environmental health, which is your relationship with the environment. So anything you do to take care of the world around you, really. Anything from recycling or understanding the environment, becoming an activist in some way for a little special personal cause. reusing, recycling, understanding waste and carbon footprints and things like that are also part of health as we teach it, and they're also part of who you are ultimately through your decision making. And last and not least, spiritual health, which tends to be one of the ones that confuses the students quite a bit. It's quite abstract as an idea, but it really is about your values, your beliefs, and your sense of belonging. That's how I try to explain it to the kids. You know, where do you belong? You know, you're wearing a school uniform, for example, that has our logo on the shoulder. So wherever you are in the world, if you see someone wearing the T-shirt, you probably reach out to them or get excited about it. Say, oh, look, I've got that T-shirt too. So the understanding that there is a commonality between different groups of people that transcends the obvious. Religion is part of that as well. Faith, if you like, is a concept, is an idea that unites people around certain values and beliefs. That's why we call it spiritual health. But it goes beyond that. You know, it goes beyond the school spirit that we try to infuse. Even, you know, being the fandom of a particular artist. You know, you go to a concert of your favorite artist and there's 10,000 people with whom you have something in common that comes out in that special moment. So appreciating that and understanding what values are and where they come from and what your family values are, your cultural values, how they intersect into other people's cultural values is important. So that's our kind of approach to health. And over the years, we used to teach it as part of PE, of physical education, and then it became a standalone subject for about 3 months a year. And now we're really incredibly lucky to have it for a whole semester for five consecutive years. So the kids love it because they see it. You know, my students, they go home and I give them homework. Their homework is to talk about class at dinner and start a conversation around that, you know. So the parents come, yeah, they came and told me about caffeine and about food and things like that, you know. So it's very empowering for them because you don't just learn a theoretical content from another subject. They learn something about their own lives and their own decision making and making healthy choices and knowledgeable choices. So it's really quite a great subject.
And I find that it's quite amazing that it's not only, I mean, obviously it is a subject in school, but it's also like an existential tool, and it's a different way of defining oneself. Like, for example, this idea of defining oneself in rapport to nature. I don't think that our generation would necessarily have this awareness. So I wonder how do they happen? I mean, share with us more about these dinner conversations that kids have, and how do parents take it also, because you have to deal with kids from different cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of environmental awareness, I would say it's something that in today's generations is a lot more out there. People are a lot more sensitized to is plastic use. I mean, the Philippines is, if I'm not mistaken, the biggest contributor to ocean plastic in the world, and it's not the biggest country. You know, it's a major cultural shift that's needed. You know, but moving towards, you know, the conversations around recycling, reusing, eliminated plastic bags, eliminating plastic bottles are kind of filtering through to this generation much more. You know, you have your Greta Thunbergs who are teenagers still and leading, you know, global movements to raise environmental awareness. So that's definitely there. There's also something called climate change anxiety that's on the rise in young people as well. You know, the fear and the stress that derives from seeing a world, you know, burning and very little political action being taken. So I think that's a universally accepted reality now. There are other things, you know, when we talk about nutrition and across cultures, you know, that varies. Usually at the young age, it's still the one that, you know, for example, some kids tell me, oh, so my mom's been lying to me all the time because she said if I drink coffee, I'll stay short. I was like, well, so my mom was lying to me. You know, those little white lies that parents tell their kids, you know, now kids feel empowered with the little science behind it to go and challenge. We also do cover physical development, so puberty, and their physical
Yes.
changes. So that is we do tell the parents ahead of time that that conversation is coming. We invite them to have that conversation ahead. We provide resources. But we really look at it at foundational foundational level to really provide vocabulary, and then to enable them to connect that to concepts such as how will that impact now your social health? How will that impact your mental and emotional health? Knowing that this rewiring is going on in your brain, for example, knowing that connections to friends are going to be changing, knowing that your physical self is going to change as well. So we want to invite that conceptual conversation rather than dissect in every single detail the puberty or the changes that happen. And like I said, kids love it, and parents, every time I have conversations with them, they're like, we didn't have this when we were at school. This is a great subject. If there are concerns, we're very open. We share all the things that we are going to say and are going to discuss with the kids. So, no, we've always had a really positive response to this, even from cultures that are traditionally a little bit less open to discussing these things. You know, in East Asia or South Asia, it isn't such an open conversation. So sometimes parents are happy that we do it. You know.
Well, that's
Greater.
excellent because it's like kids can really become ambassadors of change, even talking about emotions like fear or anger or frustration. It
Absolutely.
can be very interesting, right?
And also architects of their own change. You know, if they understand health is who they are, not just what they do, they can make choices that ultimately will affect who they are and who they can become. So really, I think the core concept or core idea of learning about health is really understanding what choices you are making and where those choices are going in any direction.
And I think that it's beautiful that this idea of health comes together with being interconnected. And that's another type of awareness that these generations have. And I was watching this video about that was like the conservation assembly, right? The
Yeah,
conservation assembly, where you had a 10 years old making a presentation with one of the tools that you offer at the school. And it was just amazing to see the level at which he integrated it and he was able to share it with the audience.
absolutely. So a little background on that, just for your audience.
Yes.
You know, I volunteer in an NGO, a non-governmental organization called Vesna Panglao Conservation. Panglao is an island in the Philippines, and so it's a partnership of Czech and Filipino, activists, if you like, and nature enthusiasts. And for the past 4 years, we've been helping to restore a coral reef in Bohol, in the southern Philippines. An area that was damaged through a lot of human activity or neglect or just lack of awareness or natural disasters. So like I told you, my journey to becoming a teacher was really about, okay, I'm doing something. How can I pass that on? How can I pass on that kind of knowledge or information? So as a diver, as a free diver, then it became apparent that school would also be a great avenue, that when kids are want to learn about the environment, want to learn about what to do. They live in this country which is so beautiful and they don't have that many opportunities, when they're so young to travel independently. So I took it to them. So I started talking about my project at school, and soon enough, not that soon, because I've been doing it for 4 years now, but now I've managed to raise a lot of awareness about this particular project, about coral conservation, about scuba diving and free diving, and developing skills around a particular area that you're passionate about. And so I recently just led a whole school assembly. So I had like 700 kids in front of me, and I decided to take them on this little journey of a fragment of coral, that is transplanted onto a nursery, and how that grows. And once that grows, it generates enthusiasm, and then the students themselves had been fundraising for us as well. So they managed to donate another nursery, and it was really an organic growth, really, that this sort of the journey of this little coral took, from me discovering about it to doing it to talking about it to then getting the kids to talk about it. And so one of my students, wanted to volunteer, is really passionate about the ocean, talks about it all the time. So I invited him on stage with me, and remember, like he's 12 years old, in front of 700 people, but he was able to actually use another tool. So the wellness wheel that I showed you earlier is one way of we call it systems thinking, really understanding how multiple aspects of a particular issues are always interconnected in one way or another. So we use another one as well when we talk about sustainability or of global issues like that we call sustainability compass. I'm just going to show it to you, which is the tool you were referring to earlier. So in systems thinking, the idea is that everything can be looked at from multiple angles. So you see, this looks like a compass, but instead of north, east, south, and west, you have nature, the economy, society, and well-being. So any one issue, I challenge you to think of any one issues in current affairs, and I can probably say that there is an angle that you can look at it from. There's an angle that can have a relationship to nature, to the economy, to society, or well-being, or an impact. So this kid was able to articulate, why is the ocean important to us? I asked him, answer that question using this compass. So he was able to say, that, so much percentage of the biodiversity of the planet is in the ocean. That's your nature. And then the trade routes that are, active all over the world and fuel the economy of many countries and different industries, obviously are important from that perspective. 40% of the world's population lives by the oceans. So societies are organized and thrive by the ocean. And of course, ultimately, the element of well-being, anything from, getting the fresh air to taking your family to the beach and really connecting with those 6 other areas of health are all important. So I was very proud of him for articulating it so well at 12 years old. I would never have been able to do that in front of such a huge audience. But it's also another way that, one big difference, I think, that is happening these days in education, at least in our school, because that's the one I can speak for. We used to be taught a lot of content, certainly in Italy, in high school, it's content-based, you have to learn everything, and those are the facts. Whereas these days, there's a greater emphasis on critical thinking and conceptual understanding. So as long as you understand the connection, the essential concept, the essential ideas underpinning any area of learning, then students are able to make connections and transfer them across disciplines. For example, in our wellness class, we talk about one of our concepts is influences or influence when we discuss social health. But, I just put that word up there on the board and I say, where do you hear this word in other subjects? And one of them said, oh, I think we learned about this in social studies when we were talking about propaganda. There you have it. And then you have an 11-year-old being able to articulate the relationship between propaganda, as a way of expressing, of influencing the masses, and influencing friendship as a way of one person making another one change their behavior accordingly. So I always find this kind of education extraordinary. The depth of content perhaps is a little secondary to the ability to establish these real world connections, which is what we didn't have. We had a lot of content, and then we were lucky, you and I, to travel the world and see it. But in other news, those who didn't get to see what they studied on paper, it just stayed as a pile of information and fancy language that had practical applicability of next to nothing. So I'm really excited to be. It's a very vibrant. It's very accessible by all students. All students are able to make connections, and they're all different. So we need to track who thinks what and where their thinking is going. But it really is about making them ready for the world of today. We live in the world with AI. You click and it will generate all the essays you would have taken you days to write back in the day. So we want them to know how to interpret text, how to see something that's good text from a not so good text, how to look at sources from different angles, how to balance points of views. So that's a skill of the future, not really generating content, which is, you've got AI for that these days. You've got ChatGPT.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's an exciting time to be connected to the kids. I suppose that they always bring freshness, but especially now they help us move forward too. And so, going back to your conservation work with the NGO in Bohol, um, please share with us more, because like if it would be to look at the coral, which is such a tiny little piece, it's actually less than 1% of our ocean, I was reading. Um, and yet it generates about, it's home to 25% of the wildlife of the ocean and provides for an estimated of 850 million people in coastal areas. So this coral is crucial somehow for our ecosystems. What is your experience in that sense? Just a fun fact, it seems that half of the coral reef was lost since the 80s, the time we were born.
I know. Can you imagine? I still imagine, what would have been like to dive here in the Philippines in the 80s or in the 70s? A completely different world, before
Yeah.
mass development. It would have been incredible. The Philippines sits at a very special place, with Indonesia and Malaysia. It's called the Coral Triangle. And in fact, the Philippines itself is the center of marine biodiversity in the whole world. So different situations have made it so that the environmental degradation that the country's experienced has really impacted the coral reefs, and a very small percentage of the original extension now exists. However, having said that, there is still an incredible, and I was diving just this weekend, and it's just mind blowing, to see the incredible diversity of life that exists here underwater. So, I mean, I'm happy to share with your audience as well, the organization that I work with. I'll just share screen again. Sorry, just give me a moment. I've lost our Zoom, losing practice. So the organization is called Vesna Panglao Conservation, and this is our Facebook page. So I invite anyone to go and check out what we do. But really, the idea of it was very simple, to restore coral reefs by, providing a space for broken coral fragments to be attached to a safe structure and thereby grow. Corals, as your audience might well be aware, are living organisms. They aren't rocks, even though they look like that sometimes. And when they break due to human activity or natural, could be typhoon or something, or some, the little polyp that makes up the colony is the structure that you see, but they're really made up of really tiny polyps, is no longer able to feed. So what we do, we collect them, we check that there's some sort of viable live material still on, and then we just tie it to a structure that we've created, usually metal. And so we've seen that, by doing that, the coral started to grow and grow and grow. And then the more it grows, and then the more opportunities there are for other species to be collected and things like that. So, I mean, if you go around the page on the coral, the project has grown to the extent that recently we participated in a sort of campaign, or in an activity to plant giant clams, which is another endangered species that's at risk from excessive fishing and poaching, really. In an area of Bohol. And through this project, you can see here some of the pictures. We are able, really, we now have around 37 of these nurseries. Some are coral beds, as you see here, and this is called staghorn corals. And then the idea is that once this coral is big enough or healthy enough, we then transplant it to an area of the reef directly onto the rock bed. So they aren't going to stay like that forever on this bed. So the project has been really successful, and we've encountered numerous challenges, from environmental challenges, from pollution. The pandemic didn't really help, even though most people thought that a reduction in human activity could mean, a regeneration of the reef. In reality, here in the Philippines, it meant that people had to fish to survive, and they had to farm to survive. There was a lot of unregulated fishing activity. There was a lot of unregulated farming activity and waste dumped directly into the sea. We saw it ourselves with algae blooming and suffocating the reef all of a sudden. Dynamite fishing returning as well due to lack of regulations. Dynamite fishing is a big problem here in the Philippines. And when there were no tourists, even all the tourist areas were subjected to that again. So imagine the destruction just for a catch. And also, like I said, if you understand systems thinking and how everything is connected, you can't just go in and regenerate coral and everybody must follow. No, because the coastal communities depend on fishing activities, they depend on farming activities. It's their land, it's their coast. So you cannot just eliminate people out of their environment. Businesses depend on it, tourism depends on that as well. So it's a really delicate balance between establishing relationships that are mutually beneficial, that are mutually conducive to growth or to mutual growth, all for the benefit of the coral on one hand and the community of the other. You can't, I tell the kids, this, no blue, no green, no, you cannot just be 100% invested in marine conservation if you're not 100% invested in conserving what's on land as well, meaning the communities, providing them opportunities to be a little bit more environmentally friendly, but also providing them job opportunities, educational opportunities, which we've also tried to do. We've trained local boys in free diving, in scuba diving. We go and give talks to local kids around the communities as well. All the people that we want to be helped by are local as well. So it really is important, and we see that time and time again in many conservation efforts. It's a lot of coral nurseries that make really nice Instagram pictures, but then they're just abandoned. They take a lot of care. They have to be cleaned, they have to be monitored, the dead material has to be removed, and it's a really constant labor of love. So we've now been there for almost 5 years and survived 2 local administrations, and politics has a big impact on what is important really, or what's on the agenda, if you like. So I'm really proud of this, and now that I haven't been able to travel to the area for a while, I'm proud that I can use my platform as a teacher, as an educator at school to talk about it and get more kids involved. And now I have a queue of people at school that want to go and see the project. So that will help us also become a better organization to cater for volunteers a little bit better, to understand what volunteers need, what we need from volunteers. We used to have that Adopt a Coral project, for example. We've discontinued that, because volunteers also come with a level of skill that we want to maximize. If you're not a good diver, maybe you shouldn't be near coral, because it breaks really easily. But you could be an incredible social media person, and that's part of volunteering for the ocean without even getting in it. So it's really understanding what people can do and how to maximize that skill. You don't necessarily always have to be in the ocean, in the water, seeing it and doing it yourself. So anyone can help.
That's excellent. And in that sense, obviously we're talking about a very local initiative, but I think that you are a great inspiration for many other people that might like to go into marine conservation. I was just discovering that about 70% of the climate resilient coral reef are found in 7 countries, amongst which Philippines, Indonesia, Cuba, Fiji, Tanzania, Solomon Islands, and Madagascar. So I think that much can be learned, and this idea of integrating the local community, of calling the young ones to be part of the project and finding the right way to integrate, right, the skills.
Also breaking it upwards, you do need the help of the administrations, of the politicians, of the people that have the political power to also enact change. And so that sort of extensive networking that we used to do in the field, talking about media, it has to be done. It has to happen in a very respectful and mindful manner, which takes a lot of cultural sensitivity. It takes a lot of emotional intelligence as well, understanding of how people operate. So yeah, by now I think we've learned a very good deal about how to go about doing things in the Philippines and how to be extremely patient. Coral waits. You don't have to rush it. As long as all of the processes are in place, if you have faith that what you're doing is worthwhile, and you're passionate about it, and you're passionate about it for the people of, the place where you're doing it, if you're not from there, then it will find its way. It will happen.
It will find its way. That's so cool. So for those that are just discovering the wheel and playing with it, uh, please, can you share with us, well, how is your compass looking nowadays? And where is your north in terms of development?
My compass, in terms of this particular project, you mean? Or
In terms of life, integrated, in terms of wellness?
well, I think that now that I see it clearly, I've been doing this job now for 10 years, and I had never held the job that long. I always had itchy feet. I find great motivation and source of continued motivation in knowing that I have a job that allows me to explore different avenues every single year. I don't, people think teaching is always the same thing, especially I teach the same subject to 160 kids twice a week. But actually, no, every person I interact with is different. Every opportunity is different. So I can never see the end of a day without something new having happened. Loving the ocean was a start, but then I developed a skill in it, so I became a free diving sort of dive master, a scuba dive master as well. So knowing what you like and developing that passion in a productive way, I think is important. And I think this country allows me to do that over and over. Learning a language, upskilling yourself throughout life is really important. You can never, I can't possibly ever just be still. I recently did one of those personality tests, the Myers-Briggs, and it turns out an adventurer is what I am. And I was reading the profile and I was like, yeah, that's right. I really do seek the novelty factor, the wow factor every day. And every day I find it, whether it's an incredible coral reef or it's a really unusual spot of Manila that I haven't seen and I got just stuck in traffic in there. You have to have you have to find the motivation and the things that make you smile everywhere. So there must be something somewhere every day around you that must make you smile. So I have that every day here. So I'm really happy, whether it's scuba diving, whether it's teaching, whether it's educating, whether it's my cat or my plants, whether it's taking an airplane to go somewhere, taking a boat, or planning future trips or planning our reunion. My mind is always active, looking at the next thing that's going to make me smile. And in that way, I keep my north pointing in that direction, if you like, and I keep my health 6 areas, if you like, really active. I do take care of my physical side, through exercise, especially through contact with the ocean. My environmental side and awareness has become part of almost what I do for a living. My social health, my connections are either in person or across the world, like you, and languages allow me to establish more and more connections every day, and really a sense of belonging that I feel both, my spiritual health, both in my professional community of teachers here in the Philippines as well, in the community that I've built here around myself. I can say that I feel that I'm having a very healthy life in the way that I talk about health.
That's excellent. That gets me inspired and looking for the wow element at every corner. Is there anything else that you would like to share or add?
No, I just like to invite everybody, who wants to discover more about the ocean or wants to discover more. You can start by looking at our Vesna page, but really it's don't be limited by what you think you don't know how to do. You don't know how to swim, it doesn't matter. You can use your other skills to help a cause. So find out about it. Look out on social media, or look up big organizations like WWF. They always have some programs. Do a research, or do a trip somewhere, travel, upskill yourself, learn to scuba dive, learn to swim, or learn to snorkel, learn to free dive. Leverage your connections. If you do have a network, what's the point of having 1,000 Instagram friends if you can't leverage that in some way? So, who are your connections? You're all part of a wider community that in some way probably yet to be discovered can help you or help a cause that you are passionate about further down the line. So, don't be afraid to ask, hey, who can help me with this? I have this idea. Can we talk about it? Talking about ideas, throwing them out is what the modern world is all about. Some are successful, some aren't, but at least they're out there. So don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone and try something new for something you're passionate about.
Try something new. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Attilio.
You're very welcome. Anytime.